Welcome to the PI Podcast, Political Insights for the Palaging Inis. I'm your host, Matt Ordonez. And we are back with another episode with a very special friend, longtime friend of the podcast. But this time, he has done what very few have done. He wrote a book, something you're holding in your hand right now. Okay. This is, of course, the Conservative Kaba, a three-step approach to protect the Filipino family for woke ideology, by Jay Aruga of the Jay Aruga Show. So, of course, you know him already. We don't need to introduce him that much anymore. Please welcome Jay Aruga. Welcome back,
Hey
Jay. And
Matt, kamusta? Kamusta sa
yes,
mga viewers, listeners ng PI Podcast, and thanks for having me again.
mhm,
It's always a pleasure to be in PI
yes,
Podcast.
of course. And thank you again for the copy of the book. It looks very good. If the
Yeah,
listeners and viewers can see, all from like St. Paul's,
publishing,
what do
yeah.
you call that? Publishing.
Yes.
Actually, that's the weird thing. Akala ko kailangan mo maging pare o madre para mag-ano, di ba? How did you get it? First of all, let's talk.
Oh,
Let's right at the beginning of the book. Why did
mm-mm.
you decide to write a book? And how was the journey, creating that book?
Mm-mm.
If you can tell us,
All right.
please.
Yeah, I'm the type of podcaster na
Mm.
sinusulat ko yung script. Actually, scripted ako pag nagpo-podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is I I was in a band before,
Mm.
songwriter ako sa band, and very careful ako sa words, 'di ba?
Mm-hmm.
I don't like na kapag nagpa-podcast ako na hindi okay yung words and
Yeah.
walang continuous flow. So I write a script, and throughout the 5 years of podcasting, I realized na I'm writing maybe a 10-page script per
Mm.
episode
Wow.
at least,
Sipag.
or at most around more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And bigla ko naisip na, teka, parang pwede ng panglibro yung lahat ng sinulat kong script sa mga episodes na ito ng
Mm.
podcast. And from there, yun, that's one reason why I came up with a book. And aside from that, medyo sayang din. Kasi when I do the podcast, ang audience, hahanapin pa nila sa previous
Mm.
episodes yung point that I make
Mm-hmm.
on the podcast, di ba? At least sa book, they could just browse, skim, and
Mm-hmm.
yon. Aside from the other thing is part siya ng bucket list ko. I
Mm.
have a bucket
Yes.
list at isa doon is to write a book. Kasama sa bucket list is to have an album with a band. Mukhang hindi na matutupad yon. Uh,
Mm.
to 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 have a PhD. Medyo
Pwede pa
malayo pa
yan,
doon.
di
But,
ba?
but ikaw, yeah, you
Yeah.
did it, di ba? So,
Not yet.
yun,
Yeah.
yun yung,
Malapit
ayun,
na.
yun. So there, that's why I wrote the book.
I mean, that's the weird thing about having a book, I mean, a lot of the contents here, I do recognize from some of your
Mm,
episodes. So, I mean,
mm,
see, people would ask, I could just listen to your podcast. Why
yeah.
go to the book? And like, what are the
Mm-mm,
advantages of buying this book instead of just
mm-mm.
listening or watching from your channels?
Yeah, uh, that's a good question. Bakit nga ba? And
Mhm.
may iba dyan, I'm sure a frequent listener of my podcast and siguro pag yung nakakapakinig na ng mga talks ko would recognize yung
Mhm.
sinulat ko, especially in sa first part, yung
Yeah.
conversion story ko. A lot of people have already listened to my conversion story.
To
But
be fair, your
siguro,
best hits.
oh, best hits
Yeah.
ko yan. And
Mhm.
I think what I could say is, nagdagdag din ako dyan sa book
Okay.
na hindi ko na banggit sa
Mhm.
podcast or anywhere. So, meron dyang best hits plus more, di ba? Usually naman yung mga
Mhm.
anthology albums ng mga bands, minsan may mga pangdagdag sila doon to
Mm.
to get the uh, the audience, di ba? Yung mga
Mhm.
old-time listeners. And aside from that, I think it's just something that caters to those who's into reading than
Mhm.
yung audio kind of person, 'di ba? There are
Mhm.
three kinds of learning, 'di ba? The
Yes.
visual, yung audio, tapos yung
Audio.
kinesthetics.
Yes.
So maybe it caters to the one who's more on the visual side
Mm-hmm.
of things.
Yeah, and for those who are not into TikTok
So
or
yeah.
YouTube, yeah, or whatever. But yeah, that's a
Oh,
cover
oh,
all your bases. That's great.
mm,
And well, let's start,
yeah,
of
yeah.
course, part by part of the book. Like the cover, it
Okay.
looks fantastic. So
Yeah.
can you tell us the story, of course? Um, First of all, how did you well, was it St. Paul that approached you? Look, St. Paul's Publishing, not
Oh,
St. Paul, Paul.
tama.
But
Hindi si
or
Apostle Paul.
the Apostle Paul, yeah. But yeah, how did that come about? Like, did they approach you? Did you approach them with your book? Or like what's the story
Mm.
there? And how did you get
Okay,
this
okay.
cover?
You
Yeah.
know, yes, yes. Matt, uh, not to be too religious or
Mm,
spiritual, pero total, part na rin naman ng brand ko. I really
mm,
do think that the Lord has set everything para
mm.
ma-publish yung book na yan.
Yeah.
Because I long to have a book. Sabi ko nga, nasa bucket list ko ito. And nung time na yon, nung sobrang early days, siguro 2000, mid-2010 to 2020, di ba?
Yes.
Mid that, mga 2015. I long to have a book. Pero nung time na yon, the book that I want to write is
Mm-hmm.
anything under the sun. Walang any purpose. So,
Mm-hmm.
walang any purpose,
Yeah.
anything under the sun, medyo comedy, medyo uh, like that. And I submitted my manuscript to publishers and
Mm.
they rejected it. I
Oh
got
my.
rejection letters from
Mm.
publishers. So what I did is nag-blog muna ako.
Mm-hmm.
Nag-blog muna ako. I had a now defunct blog
Mm.
blog and nag-blog ako after that na podcast ako. But
Mm.
prior to that, nagbaband ako. I mentioned na nagbaband ako. One day
Mm-hmm.
we got Sam O from Magic sa
Mm.
sa as a model dun sa isang music video ng
Mm-hmm.
band. And si Sam O, siya yung first celebrity guest ko sa podcast. More than 10 years after that time na kinuha namin siyang model sa band, siya yung naging first celebrity guest ko sa podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, pinakilala ko ni Sam O dun sa isang friend who is also a guest in the podcast, si Burns O. Kaasi. And
Mm-hmm.
naging part ako ng Facebook live niya, Unboxing Catholicism. And from
Mm.
there, si Burns introduced me to a priest, si Father Albert Garong, who is
Mm.
the marketing guy sa St. Paul's. So,
Mm.
so ngayon, it started doon sa pagbabanda, kay Sam O, kay Burns, then kay Father Albert.
Mm.
And from there, medyo hinug na yung manuscript kasi marami na akong episodes. And I gave it a shot. Sinend ko yung manuscript kay Father Albert. Then, he sent it sa St. Paul's. They deliberated and by God's grace,
Mm.
they chose to publish the book. Hindi ko alam kung
Mm-hmm.
ano pumasok sa isip nila.
Yeah.
But salamat. So,
Yeah.
yun. So, that's the story. And the cover, sila yung nag-pitch sa akin ng cover. All I just said is just use the brand colors ng
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
One more
Kasi yung
time.
brand
Orange and
colors.
black. Yeah.
Orange and black. So yung brand colors ng podcast. They
Mm-hmm.
gave me two covers to choose from. Yung isa is nandun yung mukha ko.
Mm-hmm.
And yun yung very awkward. Pero may siguro one or two friends na may dalawa siguro na bumoto doon. But a lot, maraming bumoto ng cover na yan.
Mm-hmm.
So that made it to uh, to the printing press. And
Mm-hmm.
yan din pinili kong cover because I would feel awkward to promote a book na may mukha ko sa harapan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Kaya yun.
I mean, a lot of people still do, and those people may be questionable.
I
But
don't
you're
know.
very humble. It's a good enough
Not to judge
face. Yeah.
not to judge them pero
Uh-huh.
ako medyo hindi ko pa kaya. Hindi ko pa carry.
Yeah. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, that's fine. That's and also modest of you. Let's move on to, of course, the title. Actually, conservative kaba, a three-step approach. Okay. So why is this the title? Why can't it
Mm,
just be like Jay Aruga? Like, why ask this question?
that's right.
Conservative kaba. Okay. Go.
Yeah. Because the subtitle ng podcast, the Jay Aruga Show, is the first conservative podcast in the
Yes.
Philippines. And dinagdagan ko na rin siya ng tagline, protecting the Filipino family from woke ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, I used the brand na conservative na because it's a good branding. I don't think na may gumamit na nun
Mm-hmm.
and may recall actually.
Yes.
And conservative din naman ako. Hindi ko naman din pinakakaila yun.
Mm.
So that's what I chose as a
Mm.
title. Conservative ka ba? And yeah,
But
there's
but
a
why
good
are you
ring to it.
asking your perspective? Like presumably this is
Mm-mm.
to your prospective readers. Why are you asking them? Conservative ka ba?
Yeah,
What's
the
yeah.
reason is tama ka. That's a good question. It's just a common phrase din.
Mm-hmm.
Hindi ko lang lagi tinatanong,
Is it?
conservative ka ba? Parang, di ba pag yung mga lolo at lola, medyo,
Mm,
conservative ka ba? Usually yun yung
I
iniisip
wasn't
nila na,
aware.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a,
from a different
medyo,
generation,
yeah, maybe from a different
probably.
generation, di ba? When you say
Okay.
conservative,
Mm-hmm.
is parang yung conservative mo naman or parang Maria Clara ang dating, di ba? Pag, di ba,
Ah.
parang
Mm-hmm.
conservative naman ito, di
Mm-hmm.
ba? So,
I see.
so
I see.
that's the I don't know. There's a certain generation na medyo
Of which
common yung
are
phrase
you
na yun.
part of, or are you necessarily
Ah,
part of? Yeah.
nung time na yon hindi naman political right ang ibig sabihin ng conservative.
Mm.
Ibig lang sabihin nun is you dress
Mahinhin,
modestly, mainhin, di
modest.
ba?
Mm.
Yun yung reason for the title.
Okay.
Is it a Hindi ko alam. I don't think it does. I don't think it does make sense.
It's like
Pero
saying, the reader, are you one of us or something? So,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
you're
Tama.
recruiting. Yeah.
Oo
The
nga. Are you one of
conservative
us?
army.
Are you red pilled?
Yes, yes. And the next one, the subtitle, a three-step approach. Now, this is what
mm,
kind of interested me. Like, first,
mm.
I believe these are the three sections of your book, actually.
Yes,
These three
yes.
steps: prepare,
Mm.
study, and
Study
apply.
and
Okay, so
apply.
yeah, apply.
No.
Now, tell me, like, how did you get these three steps? And why only
Yes.
three? Because Jordan Peterson had 12.
Oo nga eh. Ang dami, di
Yeah.
ba?
So yeah,
Yeah.
why three?
Yeah, because for me, good things come in three.
The rule of three. Yeah.
Rule of three. Tito Vic and Joey, Apo Hiking Society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, so yun. That's why three. I don't think I'm that big enough to
uh,
pitch a 12-step
okay.
approach gaya
Mm-hmm.
ni Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the simplicity, three is enough.
Mm-hmm.
And yun, that's all you need. And the
Yeah.
three-step, yun nga, prepare, study, and apply.
Yeah.
I just like the simplicity of it.
Mm.
Just to give the audience an idea,
Yeah.
prepare is the methodology.
Mm-hmm.
So I have maybe three chapters on prepare, and I've
Mm-hmm.
talked about it sa podcast din in the past. Yung
Yeah.
first episode ko sa podcast is about open-mindedness. And
Mm-hmm.
nandiyan yun sa book. And yun, I think open-mindedness is part of the preparation. Medyo gusto kong
Mm.
i-tenderize muna yung hearts and minds ng taong
Mm-hmm.
magbabasa ng libro. So,
Yes.
yun yung one of the first few parts ng prepare. And then I
Mm-hmm.
talked about fallacies. Yan.
Mm-hmm.
And yun, the some ways to have a fruitful dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I would like to think na I'm embodying it whenever I talk to people because
Mm.
nandun din yung challenge eh. Hindi, sometimes I fail to do it but as much as I can I try to do it. And those
Mm-hmm.
are suggestions. Maybe some other people would have other suggestions on the methodology on how to
Yeah.
talk to people. But the the thing I'm driving there is at least to prepare first your mindset, how you would talk to people, and then tsaka kayo makipag-usap sa tao. The study part, it's the
Mm-hmm.
icing on the cake. Siguro yun na
Mm.
yung mga stats, logic, and everything.
Mm.
After that, once you you prepare your mindset, your methodology, you studied, you apply everything naman. And
Yeah.
that's a common question.
Mm-hmm.
Paano ko ba i-apply ang lahat ng ito? Paano ko kakausapin yung family member or yung friend about all of these? So,
Mm-hmm.
I gave some suggestions sa apply, and it's not an exhaustive
Yeah.
list. As I go along, biglang na-publish na yung libro pero biglang nagkakaroon ako ng mga new ideas, and
Yeah.
God willing, kung St. Paul's na okay yung libro,
Mm-hmm.
it sell well,
Mm-hmm.
sana magka part 2 to have all
Sana,
these
no?
new ideas.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, just before we move on to
Mm.
these specific parts, just to clarify,
Mm.
how would you, and it's not really clear to me how different. I mean, I know the content. I've gone through the
Mm.
book actually, and thank you for the copy.
Mm.
What is the difference between preparing and studying? Because in a way, studying is a
Mm.
form of preparation, right? So how do
That's
you
right.
distinguish
That's right.
both these processes or these steps a bit further? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Prepare, as I mentioned in the book, it's just the methodology. Wala ka
Mm-hmm.
pang any statistics na
Mm.
ini-study. And sometimes you
Uh-huh.
can get by with preparation. We
Mm.
just, you can just get by with, I mentioned dyan yung kay Trent Horn,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the 3 secrets to defending the faith. Ask
Mm-hmm.
questions, listen, tapos the other ones find the middle ground. And sometimes you can just get by with that.
Mm.
Wala kang any statistics na
Okay.
gamitin. So the study part, this is where you you have your logic,
Mm-hmm.
yung statistics,
Yeah.
researches, and all. And sometimes you can just get by with just the methodology.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, the study part is
Mm-hmm.
the icing in the cake.
Yes.
And if you siguro, if you're trying to defend a topic,
Mm-hmm.
maybe at some point list down ka na ng mga
Uh-huh.
news that will strengthen your argument.
Yeah.
So,
So basically preparing is like forming your outline, your
mm,
core, and then
right.
just filling it up. Studying is actually filling it up with the
Yeah.
facts and figures,
Right.
theories, etc. Okay.
Right.
So it's
Right.
skeleton and then siguro
Yeah.
that's the musculature or
The meat.
laman. Yeah, the meat.
The meat.
And then
Mm,
applying is like moving, actually
moving.
doing
Yeah.
action. So that's okay.
Yes,
I
that's right.
understand now.
Actualization na siya. Mm,
Actualization, yes.
mm,
Now moving on. So you mentioned in the prepare part, you actually have like a long list of different logical terms and logical fallacies like ad hominem, red
mm,
herring, what about this, and false dichotomy,
mm,
non sequitur, strawman. All of them are here, and it's actually quite impressive. But if I read this book actually, I finished it as you
mm.
know very quickly because it actually flows
Ang
very
bilis
well.
mo nga
Yeah.
basa.
No, well, partly it's also because it's actually smoothly written, but I
Thank
have to
you.
admit, like this part, kind of it slowed down a bit for me, and I was just
Oh,
wondering,
okay. Yeah.
why did you decide to put almost a textbook of logical fallacies? Why do you think they need to know these things?
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
That's right. And I, sa totoo lang, right now nga, kulang pa nga eh. Kasi
Oh, okay.
kanina,
It's not even all of them.
kanina, I always like encounter trolls, di ba? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes may mga bashers, haters.
Okay.
And biglang, kanina lang may nag-commit ng no true Scotsman fallacy
Mm.
sa akin. And wala sa
Uh-huh.
book yun.
Uh-huh.
So, hindi ko na-mention sa book yun.
Can you
And
elaborate like what the no true Scotsman is?
yeah, the
And
no true
yeah.
Scotsman fallacy is when you move the goalpost, for instance. Di ba? Kunwari,
Mm.
I said na a a ito yung comment niya doon sa post ko.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a Catholic school celebrating Pride Month is like a
Mm-hmm.
vegan restaurant
Yeah.
serving lechon. So yun yung post
Mm-hmm.
ko. And
Mm-hmm.
nag-post doon. May nag-post doon. Sabi niya, I don't know any Catholic-owned school na nagse-celebrate ng Pride Month.
Mm.
And may pinost akong link from a
Mm-hmm.
certain school. Hindi
Mm-hmm.
ko na i-mention dito.
Okay.
Then, then sinabi niya na that's not a Catholic-owned school. That's a Catholic-inspired school.
Okay.
So medyo
Meron
minod
palang
na yung
ganun.
goalpost, I
Oo,
think,
oo.
because it's the school that I put in the link is clearly a Catholic school, pero hindi
Mm-hmm.
niya inaccept
Right.
yung yung school na yon because for him it's not a Catholic owned school. So that's
Mm.
the no true Scotsman
Okay.
fallacy. Medyo minumove mo yung goalpost mo.
Mm-hmm.
So there, now, to answer the question why I put an almost exhaustive list ng logical
Almost.
fallacies.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe for the readers and the audience to avoid those.
Mm-hmm.
Kasi sometimes having fallacies sa discussion,
Mm.
it's not fruitful sa conversation. And at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, so that it would prepare them to call them out as well
Yeah.
if they
Uh-huh.
encounter. Minsan kasi yung isang uh, someone who's defending a point, they cannot detect a fallacy even if it
Mm-hmm.
hits them between the eye, di ba? And
Yeah.
mako-question nila even yung same line of thinking nila and same logic. So
Mm-hmm.
I put it there para ma-equip din sila. I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned sa book that I started the podcast during nung
Mm-hmm.
2019 elections. It's a senatorial election, midterm
Mm-hmm.
ni Duterte.
Yes.
And I'm seeing a lot of fallacious arguments nung
Uh-huh.
time na yon.
Mm.
And so yon, I just
Uh-huh.
want to equip the readers at least on that
Yeah,
part.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a bit strange and surprisingly
Mm.
technical actually for the kind of book
Oo
because all
nga
of a
eh.
sudden you're very personal and then all of a sudden these are the
Yeah.
logical
I,
fallacies. But I think it's
oo
welcome
nga.
because parang walang subject na logic so much. Maybe in college,
Mm-mm.
but in terms of high school and senior high school, parang konti lang eh. Konti
Di
na
ba?
lang yung schools na
Kaya
nagturo
nga, di
ng
ba?
logic mismo. I
Oo.
remember having that in English writing classes, but
Mm-mm.
not so much in. I think it's a form of philosophy, logic. It's a branch of
Oo.
philosophy that you have to practice a lot. So it's good
Tama.
that you're
Oh,
introducing these to your readers. I think I skipped a bit, but anyway, there's
okay lang.
of course in chapter one you have this
I,
very expanded introduction of yourself. Who is Jay Aruga? Sino si Jay Aruga? And of course, you talked
oh,
about your own journey. What I found interesting about that chapter is that you somewhat equated the rise of your own, the growth of your own Catholic uh, faith,
mm,
finding God, finding your faith, and of course becoming a conservative. Now,
mm,
may I just ask there, like, of course, I don't want to repeat those who are
mm,
already familiar with you and who don't want to
mm,
spoil those who are not. But at least the underlying idea there is basically the more, well, you're equating Catholicism with conservatism, where
mm,
there are also elements of Catholicism within the within
mm.
Catholicism that are progressive and
Yeah,
not just
yeah,
conservative, because
that's
there,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
and even within the Catholic Church there are progressive elements and
right,
conservative elements. So what do you have to say?
right.
Are you staking your claim that if you're not conservative, you're not a good Catholic? Or like if you're Catholic, then you eventually end up being conservative? Like, are you equating the two? Or what do you think? What are you trying to say with these two uh aspects of
Mm.
yourself that you put together in the first chapter?
No, I think I didn't make a claim there na the
Mm,
Catholic Church is conservative, di ba?
mm,
I think I have a section there that
mm-hmm.
answers the question if
Okay.
conservative bang Catholic Church or
Mm-hmm.
liberal.
Yeah.
So, o- I think ang linagay ko lang dyan is how I became conservative from being
Mm-hmm.
Catholic. And
Yes.
that's the additional part sa book that I don't usually talk about sa mga speaking engagements ko
Mm-hmm.
or even in the podcast. So yung
Mm,
transition from my conversion to Catholicism to
mm-hmm.
becoming a conservative podcaster. I don't think I made that claim. So
Ah,
yun yung
it was
masabi
more
ko
of like
na
a underlying like
Yeah.
maybe
May
implication. Yeah.
mm,
I don't know.
yeah.
Like, go ahead.
Although in the book I told the story kung bakit ako naging conservative. And I don't think the church picked a side kung conservative or
Mm-hmm.
liberal siya, di ba?
Yeah.
Especially kay Pope Francis.
Yeah.
And and I and I think I I claimed, hindi ko alam kung naisulat ko sa book, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit center right in my beliefs. So maybe sa
Okay.
podcast ko na banggit ito. Eh, hindi naman ako sobrang far right, but
Mm-hmm.
center
Thank
right
God. No.
ako when it comes to when
Yeah.
it comes to my belief. And I even get into some altercations with some
Mm-hmm.
traditionalist talaga
Okay.
na Catholics. Especially kay Pope Francis. Because si Pope
Mm-hmm.
Francis is one of the subjects that I really changed my mind on.
Mm.
And I'm talking about dyan sa book, may question dyan sa open-mindedness section.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a time you change your mind on something? So I
Mm-hmm.
even ask myself that.
Mm.
And ang pinaka-recent is si Pope Francis because dati I'm really anti-Pope Francis. And
Mm.
yung mga ibang listeners ng podcast or viewers ng podcast who also watch me dun sa isang program, yung Unboxing Catholicism, there was a time talaga, yung kasama ko dun, si Burns Kaasi, is
Mm-hmm.
very pro Pope Francis. And whenever he praises Pope Francis, napaparoll ako ng eyes sa live eh. Napapakringe
Mm-hmm.
ako sa kanya.
Mm-hmm.
That's the time talaga medyo hindi ko gusto si Pope Francis
Uh-huh.
until medyo na break yung what I think of Pope Francis because it seems like he's being just framed to be a far left figure when in fact mukhang hindi naman siya sobrang far left,
Mm-hmm.
and he said a lot of things that the left are parang naiinis, di ba?
Mm-hmm.
Yung isang encyclical niya, yung Dignitas Infinita.
Mm-hmm.
Hindi, baka hindi siya encyclical. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the a document, Dignitas
Mm-hmm.
Infinita. So it talked about
Mm-hmm.
gender theory.
Mm-hmm.
Medyo nainis yung left doon. So
Mm-hmm.
medyo nagbago ako ng pananaw kay Pope Francis. So
Mm.
yun, so I think the church is neither left nor right. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, I just chose to be center right in my
Mm-hmm.
beliefs.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it is a huge organization, so of course there'll be
Mm,
disagreements and various
definitely.
views. Yeah, even from
Mm.
the magisterium, people
Uh,
disagree with
eh,
that a lot. Yeah.
yeah, and I could show receipts na I
Mm.
defended fiducia supplicans, and dito
Ah,
masyado
okay.
akong
Mm-hmm.
nabaril ng traditionalist na Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
But yun nga, fiducia supplicans, it shows great sympathy, care sa
Mm-hmm.
mga persons who identify as LGBT. And I agree with that sa Pope.
Mm-hmm.
Biro mo, blessings lang naman to people
Mm-hmm.
who who identify as LGBT. Pagkakait pa natin, di ba? So,
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah. I mean, it's good that you're, I mean, even with the Catholic faith, we
Mm,
should use our reason. We should
right.
even doubt when it is necessary. We
Right.
don't just accept, but yeah, at least it provides structure. And I think
Yes.
you've mentioned several times in your book that you believe in a balance between conservative and liberalism. Maybe you can
Yeah, yeah,
elaborate on that. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
That's right. That's right. I do believe in a perfect society, there's a
Mm,
balance between conservatism and liberalism, di ba?
mm,
Because kailangan you need to criticize each other and hindi masyadong maglilin on one side too much
mm-hmm,
yung society. And I believe journalism is inherently liberal
mm-hmm,
in a sense, di ba? Because they find critiques of
mm,
the structure, yung status quo. So, in a perfect society, there's a balance para hindi masyadong maging too rigid, too authoritarian,
Mm.
yung both sides.
Yeah.
Because both sides could be authoritarian, yung the left and the right. So,
Yeah.
yan, kailangan bantayan yung isa't isa.
Hmm. I like that very balanced definition, are there
Mm.
balanced, well, your instinct towards balance and moderation.
Yeah.
Let's move on actually to, well, one of the central concepts of your book, or perhaps how you framed, let's say, your enemy. And that's, of course, the woke. You're defending the Filipino
Mm, mm.
family from woke ideology. And
Yep.
here you also define your terms. You define what woke
Mm,
is. And a lot of these definitions are actually from also right-wing intellectuals, figures, writers.
mm, mm,
Now, of course, maybe you can talk a little bit about like what is woke, talk about that definition, why these
mm,
definitions. And I do want, well, yeah.
mm.
So yeah, let's go start with that. Like, what is woke for people who may not know, or how would you
Yes.
define woke? Yeah.
Yeah. Just a simple definition is this is a cultural Marxism.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go back to Marxist ideology, I
Mm-hmm.
just read yung Communist Manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
Sila ni Frederick Engels, they divide the society into oppressor and oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, yung bourgeoisie, sila yung oppressor, proletariats, yung
Yes.
oppressed. And from there, medyo na na-disappoint sila because hindi nag-succeed
Mm-hmm.
yung communism. And what happened from there is nagkaroon ng repackaging yung communism,
Mm-hmm.
yung and eventually I think si Duchka yung nag-coin ng the long march to the
Mm-hmm.
institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, nandito na sila sa institutions
Mm-hmm.
and mapapansin natin in every facet of the society
Mm-hmm.
right now is parang nahati ang lahat into an oppressor and oppressed class.
Mm. Yes.
And the woke ideology is something that ito yung underlying niya na
Mm-hmm.
concept. It's just a repackaged Marxist ideology wherein everything is divided into oppressor oppressed. And let's
Mm.
take one for example, feminism, oppressed yung babae, the patriarchy is the
Mm.
oppressor. And
Yeah.
when it comes to racism, yung whites yung oppressor,
Mm-hmm.
everyone else are oppressed.
Yes.
Uh, so yun yung basic definition ng woke ideology. And in some cases, baka meron ngang mga taong masasama talaga. But
Mm-hmm.
to say that the system is this, medyo parang
Mm-hmm.
that's too extreme of a
Mm-hmm.
pitch.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I mean, we've heard a lot about woke before, of course. And
Mm,
yeah, you made a good condensed definition, but a lot of people have many definitions. And the
yeah.
problem with the label of woke, and I don't know if you notice this, you can disagree with me on this, but this is my
Mm,
observation. No one really, at least not anymore,
not anymore.
identifies as
Right.
I am woke or we are
Yes. Yes.
woke. It's actually a
Tama ka.
derogatory term
Yeah.
used by right-wing
Yeah.
conservatives or maybe anti-woke people.
That's right.
I mean, to identify them.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is, can you still attack something that they don't see themselves as guilty of? Like if you know, like even let's say, for example, in the
Yes.
Bible, when you fight demons, you need to call them out by their name,
Yes. Yes.
name that they would even accept or they would respond to. But if you make like a if you
Mm,
like if the creation of the word woke is it's like a boogeyman, but
mm,
it doesn't fully describe them or they don't identify as that,
mm.
then aren't you just fighting like straw men?
Yeah.
Isn't woke a straw man?
Yeah.
Uh Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good question. And siguro if there's anything na naging successful ang conservative movement is
Mm-hmm.
na poison nila tong term na
Mm-hmm.
woke. Because I remember a few years ago, medyo badge of honor pa yung pagiging woke, di ba?
Mm.
Ah, yung mga activist sa
Yes.
Tagalog, ito lang naman yung tinawag na mulat, di ba? Mulat
Mm-hmm.
ka na ba, di ba? Especially
Mm.
sa mga state universities na aktivista,
Mm-hmm.
yun yung lagi nilang term na ginagamit sa Tagalog. And right now, medyo naging successful yung conservative movement na maging derogatory term
Mm-hmm.
yung saltang woke to a point na nahihiya na silang gamitin yung term
Mm-hmm.
na ito. And the the concept is there.
Mm-hmm.
Kaya even though no one uses it anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
the concept is still there. The ideology is definitely still there.
Yeah.
Wala namang even na hindi nila gamitin yung term. And to some point, I might disagree na wala nang gumagamit ng term because I just saw Joy Spring interviewed someone,
Mm.
a woke pastor who's
Mm.
using the term woke in
Like I
flying
am woke.
colors.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I am a woke
Kaya
pastor. Okay.
siguro meron pang iba. Meron pang iba.
Mm. Okay.
But yeah, really, if you search yung interview ni Joy Spring,
Mm-hmm.
so there's this woke pastor.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept's still there. And
Mm-hmm.
at the very least, what we're fighting is not a boogeyman na
Mm-hmm.
people who talagang identify as woke per se,
Mm-hmm.
but who embodies the ideology na the woke is pushing
Mm-hmm.
for.
Mm. I mean, and the interesting thing about, the woke is that there are a lot of books that have been written about the woke. You cite some of them in your book yourself. A lot of them are mostly
Mm,
in, of course, the American industry. Actually, the funny thing is, Jon Stewart actually
right.
made a skit about the conservative, like anti-woke book industry, and to say that like they're out, like
Mm,
continuously outraged over maybe nothing, so that but my question is,
yeah.
why does the Philippines need anti-woke book? Like, is the woke here? And
Mm,
if they had needed an anti-woke book, why can't they just buy one of the books in like from America? Like Jordan Peterson's books are
yeah,
here. I believe some of
right.
Ben Shapiro's books are also here. Why buy
That's
your
right.
anti-woke book? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Yep. That's a good question. And
yeah.
maybe because the the books of Jordan Peterson, si Shapiro,
Mm-hmm.
they're not specifically talking to a Filipino audience. And I
Mm-hmm.
think
Yeah.
that's what I'm aiming for in the
Mm-hmm.
book. And what I aimed for in the book is for it to be easy to read, especially
Mm-hmm.
yung high schoolers who are not really into reading books. Medyo, yun yung ini-aim ko
Mm-hmm.
na dyan sa book na yan. And
Mm-hmm.
I try to aim to speak to the Filipino audience who
Mm-hmm.
are and maybe yung mga iba na hindi pakilala si Jordan
Mm-hmm.
Peterson
Yeah.
and Ben Shapiro because you need to pitch them to some audience.
Yeah.
And marami pang mga hindi nakakilala kina Peterson and
Yeah.
Shapiro. How I wish na talagang uh, they're just reading Peterson and Shapiro, then maybe baka uh, I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to write a book. But
Yeah.
sometimes masyado ding scholarly yung pagsusulat ni na
Mm-hmm.
Peterson, Shapiro, and everyone. What I tried in that book is hindi ko masyadong ginawang too scholarly. Medyo
Okay.
I tried it to be ground level na I attempted at least na ang
Yes.
simple Filipino could just
Mm-hmm.
grab that book
Mm-hmm.
and read it and
Yeah.
maintindihan lang yung mga concepts.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for those who are scholarly, you do have
A bit.
references and
Yeah.
sources and all the chapters, to be
Yeah.
fair, actually. But also I think the tone of your prose, actually, it kind of sounds like your podcast as well. I mean, it's
Kaya nga
taglish
eh.
and with some jokes even. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's part of your strategy, on
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
people
That's right. That's right.
to discuss it. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about, okay, we're moving on from prepare to study, and you have
Great.
three heavy
Yes.
substantial uh
Mm.
chapters on three big topics. You
Yes.
have divorce, same-sex unions, and gender ideology. Now, of course, I won't have you
Mm.
repeat them here or like because of
Mm.
course I don't want to spoil it. But maybe you can I want to ask you like at least for the listeners here to want a preview of your book, why these three topics? Go ahead.
Yeah. It used to be five
Oh,
when I
okay.
was when I was writing the book. So you mentioned three. Dapat kasama pa dyan yung abortion
Mm.
and I think there's a chapter on contraception.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the necessity na
Mm-hmm.
ma-release yung book, I kept it to three. And ito naman
Uh-huh.
yung uh, almost immediate na need right
Mm-hmm.
now because this year the divorce bill is
Yes.
heavily debated on
Yes.
the Soji bill. We talked about it last year sa PI podcast, so that's
Mm-hmm.
heavily debated on as well.
Yeah.
Same-sex marriage or union not far behind. So that's why I focused muna on those three. And
Mm-hmm.
medyo part of that is as experimental phase pa yung book. So
Mm-hmm.
medyo dinrap ko muna yung abortion and contraception because
Mm.
nandiyan na yung RH law, medyo wala na masyadong need. I mean, hindi
Mm-hmm.
naman sa totally walang masyadong need. There's still a need because we're heading towards an aging population by 2030.
Okay.
Pero hindi siya immediate need for now. So
Mm.
so sa contraception, yun yung need. Abortion,
Mm-hmm.
uh, medyo farther down the line pa tayo. So these two chapters, maybe I'll write it's a part two of the book. So to answer your question, why divorce, same-sex marriage or union, and gender ideology, because these are the immediate
Yeah.
need, uh, at least in this year,
Mm-hmm.
because they're heavily discussed. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, at least you have leftover material for
yeah,
the next book, actually, Abortion and
right,
Contraceptive.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Although what I noticed in all five of these topics is that they are highly personal and close to the skin. Like say
Oh yeah,
like for
yeah.
example, like someone is undergoing divorce and then they come read your
Mm,
book, or someone who has read your
right,
book and say, don't do
right,
that. You cannot do that. You have to pray, etc. So I want to ask
right.
though, maybe you can go through one
Yeah.
by one or just a few of them. Like, how did you approach these topics, especially knowingly
Mm,
that these are highly
mm,
personal, highly close to the heart? Like,
yes.
can you reach them
Yeah.
with you have a lot of references, facts, and figures.
Right.
Like
Right.
besides, of course, these facts and figures, how do you reach
Yeah.
their hearts about these
Yeah.
topics that are close to their hearts?
Yeah. And i- very sensitive topics.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Very, very sensitive topics.
Mm.
For divorce, and I mentioned sa book that I really don't take pleasure
Mm.
talking about divorce,
Mm-hmm.
especially sa podcast. Whenever I talk about it, I receive a lot of backlash. But kailangan talagang pag-usapan eh.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't talk about it, medyo
Mm.
there's a side dun sa discussion that will really not be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Kaya I need to talk about it. And yeah, and unfortunately, pinag-usapan yung divorce maybe second quarter of this year. Ang daming
Mm-hmm.
mga new arguments that I heard that
Mm.
I wish I could have put in the book because I could have
Mm-hmm.
responded to them because I submitted the manuscript ng book January this year
Mm.
and medyo recent yung conversation sa divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wish na there are some elements din na nailagay ako sa book. But
Mm.
I tried to put I I I don't know if I'm not sure if successful ako, maybe nag-fail ako. I
Mm.
really tried to be careful as much
Yeah.
as I can sa sa book when talking about these sensitive topics. And in fact, may avatar ako eh.
Mm.
Kapag nagpa-podcast ka, kailangan meron kang avatar na
Mm.
listener. Siya yung parang pinipicture mo na kapag
Mm-hmm.
nabasa yung aklat mo, hindi ka na ba niya kakausapin ever?
Okay.
Or kapag narinig niya yung podcast mo, hindi ka na niya kakausapin ever.
Uh-huh.
And yung avatar ko, especially sa same-sex marriage and gender ideology topic, I have this close family member.
Mm-hmm.
And di ko na sabihin kung how close
Mm-hmm.
dito sa episode. Maybe offline.
Sure.
Sasabihin ko sa'yo kung how close. But I do have a close family member
Mm.
who identify as a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
And siya yung avatar ko. And whenever I write, iniisip
Mm.
ko, how would she take this kapag
Mm.
sinabi ko ito? And
Mm.
I'm not sure kung how would she take it. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I write these
Mm.
sensitive
Yeah.
topics. You need to have an avatar na kapag
Yeah.
binasa niya ito, napakinggan niya ito.
I mean,
Uh,
that's actually quite beautiful. I have to ask though. I think every podcaster, especially when you're recording alone, like you have to imagine who you're talking to, and you have to be
mm,
careful and just to that person.
right.
I think if I may ask though, number one, is this person what is this well, generally this person is close
Mm,
to you. Do you think they're of course reasonable? Because sometimes they can just be closed-minded. So they're opening to
mm,
listening in general. And number two, I think this is also important. In a way, both this person that
mm,
you should be talking to, both of you share a relationship of well, a loving relationship, like that of a
mm.
family. Do you agree with that? Like,
Uh,
your who that avatar should be. Like, there should be love in there. Like, even if it's for like a friend or a stranger, or
right,
the love of God, maybe. Yeah, go
right.
ahead.
Here's what I'll tell you. Medyo personal. Itong avatar ko na ito, nung
Mm.
pumunta ako sa US,
Mm.
she doesn't want to see me.
Oh,
Dahil
already. Oh, that's
she
too
doesn't
bad.
want to see me dahil
Okay.
she knows na ito yung views ko. She knows
Mm.
na
Right.
here's my view
Mm.
on
Yeah.
LGBT stuff. She
Mm.
doesn't want to see me.
Yeah.
And nung nasa US ako, I texted her na, hey,
Yeah.
I wish we could drop by sa
Yes.
inyo and uh, we could sit down and talk.
Yes.
Maybe parang you just think this is what I believe in, pero
Yeah.
in reality, maybe I could tell you the reason why I believe
Mm.
what I believe. So I message her. So
Mm.
she's not really yung tipong by default uh, she's fine makipag-usap sa akin. She
Uh-huh. Yeah.
medyo may konting animosity na when
I
the
see.
moment I identified as a conservative
Mm-hmm.
podcaster.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, well, at least moving forward, it's good
mm,
that you still imagine that a version for could be listening to you, and
mm,
it's a reminder to be careful, delicate,
right,
but firm at least.
right.
It's reminiscent of like a technique of like when I used to be in the debate club, and we are asked,
Mm,
maybe sometimes when we're asked to judge, how do we judge the winner of the debate team? And like which team, like the
mm,
opposition or the pro? And basically the general rule is, uh imagine you are an average but reasonable person. How would
mm,
you, like, which side would you choose? So I think in this
mm,
scenario, I think one thing is for sure. You have to imagine that they're reasonable, meaning they're willing to listen, but also you'd be willing to adjust out of love,
right.
like you don't
Tama.
judge them, but at the same time you don't adjust the truth. I think that's where the
Mm,
reasonability comes in. It's like the limits of that love, I guess.
mm,
I suppose a good way to approach things in general when you talk to people. There's
mm,
uh, have reason but also love, the balance of that.
right.
So yeah, that's
Yeah.
what.
I-
Wow. I think we
No,
got the
if I may,
yeah.
yeah, if I may add, dun sa apply part, I think I wrote down there yung sinabi ni Noel
Mm-hmm.
Mering sa akin, which is
Yeah.
napakaganda. Yung sixth sense analogy when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to dealing with people who may be woke. So
Mm-hmm.
yung sa sixth sense is meron din yung bata, di ba? And siguro spoiler na to ng sixth sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yung bata sa dulo
Yeah.
na namatay siya, yung sumusuka,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
ginulat siya sa tent. So yung kwento doon is yung young girl, she's being poisoned by a mother na may Munchausen by proxy
Mhm.
syndrome. And pinopoison niya yung bata. But in between the mother na nagpo-poison dun sa bata is
Mm.
yung father nagbibigay ng food, ng soup dun sa girl galing
Mhm.
sa mother na hindi niya alam poisoned
Mm.
na pala ito.
Yes.
So, this analogy is very helpful on
Yeah.
how to approach people
Mm.
who might be woke. So, usually yung bata, sila yung unknowing victim.
Mm.
Maybe they're na indoctrinate into gender ideology or something.
Mm.
Sila yung bata na yon, unknowing victim. So, they need to be healed, di ba?
Yes.
Then yung father, sila yung may dala ng poison. Hindi nila alam na poison pala yung dala nila. They could be
Mm.
yung mga advocates na hindi man lang masyadong na-think it through
Yeah.
yung pinag-advocate nila.
Yeah.
And then yung mother na may Munchausen by proxy syndrome, sila talaga yung
Mm.
medyo sinister. Maybe pwede mo silang
Mm.
ma-convert at some point, but ang immediate thing na kailangan gawin sa kanila is they need to be stopped. Because
Mhm.
maybe sila yung mga big pharma or
Uh.
just selling these drugs, maybe puberty blockers, cross-sex
Mhm.
hormones sa mga batang ito. They're just in it for the money,
Mm.
and ang immediate thing for to do with them is kailangan muna ma-stop sila
Mm.
either by legislation or
Mm.
something else, di ba? So
I see.
that's how you can discern how to
Uh-huh.
deal with people. And yun, I always say na hindi naman lahat ng mga person na maaring woke are
Mhm.
activist, or hindi sila yung mga parang yung big
S-
pharma,
Like some people can
big
be saved,
companies.
something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Uh-huh.
it's a case by case basis.
Uh-huh. Speaking of which, I think we're moving on to the final section, which is apply, and you've
Mm,
already mentioned it. Actually, this is the part that's the newest to me, the ones that I was
mm.
the most engaged by, but unfortunately, it's one of the shortest parts of the book. So,
Yeah.
medyo nabitin ako. Hopefully,
Oo nga.
you'd
So,
expand on this in the future episodes or future
mm,
books, or maybe here. But here's the thing: sometimes, okay, basically there are 6 points under
mm,
apply. It's number
mm.
one, be a saint, make
Yeah.
evangelization the norm again, or
Mm.
metna.
Man.
Pray,
Yep.
teach the kids, evangelize subtly, and have courage. Now, of course, um, okay, 2, 4, 5, and 6, I think are secular enough. People can understand,
All right.
teach,
Sige.
have courage, pray, and be a saint. I think this is the most explicit of
Mm.
being Catholic that you have uh have,
Yeah, yeah.
have been. So may I ask though, like, first of all, how do you write this apply part, and
Mm,
why it's like this, because you're
mm.
literally, this is the most in your face, I'm evangelizing the readers. Is
Oh,
it
yeah.
because of St. Paul?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, okay,
And
okay.
tama. Good thing you brought that up. I haven't
Mm.
thought of it
Uh-huh.
na because of St. Paul. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe I think that part, I just want to activate the
Mm.
readers. Di ba? Medyo,
Mm-hmm.
that's what's lacking sa conservative
Mm-hmm.
movement. And sometimes parang punching bag lang kami.
Mm.
Yung iba, the worst thing that could happen sa isang conservative is passive-aggressive kami.
Mm.
Uh, Nagtutroll lang kami, but hindi naman nag-evangelize.
Mm.
And I think I repeated in the book many times to do all those things charitably, di ba?
Mm-hmm.
May iba who argues a lot sa comment section, but they're not
Mm.
doing it charitably. So,
Mm.
ang goal ko dyan sa apply part is to activate the readers,
Mm.
because I think the left is really good at activism.
Mm.
Conservatives, halos wala akong makikitang mga
Mm.
activist sa conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would like to drive sa apply part is not all
Mm.
people are like me na may podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll be you'd be surprised na yung mga simple conversations
Mm.
with people are already ways to evangelize.
Mm.
And I think yun lang yung gusto kong i-drive to make evangelization
Mhm.
the norm. And dati, Spanish uh, conquistador
Mm.
period,
Yeah.
nag-sail pa sila ng ship
Mm.
to evangelize. Eh, sabihin natin, may mga iba-iba silang motive, but
Mhm.
most of them, ang prime reason nila is to spread Christianity.
Mhm.
These days, hindi natin kailangan mag-sail ng ship.
Mhm.
But marami sa atin hesitant to talk about these things
Mm.
to people. And I want people to have that realization because I think I mentioned there that it really takes a village to take back the culture.
Mhm.
And kailangan talaga, it's not a one man uh,
Mhm.
task.
Mhm.
It's maybe maraming tao and maybe generational. Baka mamaya can't be this generation lang ang mapag at least
Mm.
take back ng culture.
Yeah.
So that's what I aim for sa apply. And most
Yeah.
of them actually mga practical tips. Uh,
Mhm.
I as I think about it nga medyo may mga pumapasok na din sa akin that that's good to add sa apply on
Mhm. Yes.
the next book, especially the internet part kasi hindi pa ako masyadong
Mhm.
nag-deal dyan on how to apply all these things sa internet, and maybe
Mhm.
that's worth talking about in the
Mhm.
next book. But from there, I just put some practical tips.
Mm.
Una-una, be a saint because
Mhm. Practical.
practical.
Because it's so easy. No. Yeah, why
Mahirap
is that?
ba,
Yeah.
but
Mm.
you cannot preach kung ikaw mismo,
Mm.
di ba? You don't embody what
I
you
mean, most
you
people say
teach.
practice what you preach, but then be a
Right.
saint is a bit scarier because if you know what
Kaya nga eh.
saints are, a lot of them die or
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, live long but difficult lives. So
Right, right,
yeah, that's a it's
right.
a very strong thing. Can you elaborate on being a saint and how have you been
Yeah.
a saint?
I
Yeah.
hindi ko definitely hindi pa ako saint. I don't know kung magiging saint ako. And one of the reasons is buhay pa ako.
Mm,
You need to die to be a saint.
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So, but gusto ko yung sinabi ni Patrick Coffin, be a saint, what else is there? And that's
Mm-mm.
really the
Or at least try. Yeah.
least try, di ba?
Yeah.
Yun yung magandang main mission vision
Mm-hmm.
statement ng isang tao. And it helps din sa evangelization because I mentioned ad hominem somewhere sa
Mm,
chapter. At least medyo maiiwasan ka na ma-ad hominem. At least
mm-hmm.
that's one
Mm,
worry na you take out. At
mm,
least try, di ba? Because we fail din naman pero if you don't try, wala, di ba?
mm-hmm.
So, yun. Because I don't know, it helps clear up your mind as well, di ba?
Mm-hmm.
For me,
Mm,
to attempt that,
mm-hmm.
medyo bawas siya ng baggage
Mm,
sa'yo, di ba?
yeah.
Kaya it helps in talking to people then.
Although I do believe that I think patron saint of podcasting is still vacant, so maybe the competition is stiff, as you know.
Medyo stiff, oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, may
kaya nga.
mga pare din at you know. So, but
So,
it's worth
kasi,
considering. Yeah.
so yun. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, thanks for pointing out that chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm writing down things that would
Yeah.
be in the next book.
I mean, well, you use words that are actually very, well, they're challenging. They're very
Mm,
loaded. In fact, it would be a good invitation to discover, like, what does sainthood mean, at least
yeah.
in politics? Because the weird thing about most saints is that
See,
they're either killed by politics or they don't really do well in
right, right,
politics. Usually it's,
right. See, Thomas More, yung patron saint ng
yes.
politicians, was
Mm.
killed because of politics.
Okay, so for our final question, at least,
Mhm.
well, at this last, let's to wrap this session off regarding our book.
All right.
Perhaps you can just say like now that you've written the book, what are some of your own takeaways from doing this, and what are your hopes for this book, and what you want it to achieve, at least maybe in the
Mm,
short term and the long term? Go ahead, Jay.
yeah, I think my main takeaway is I think it's possible for a regular Joe pala na
Mm-hmm.
makapagsulat at
Mm-hmm.
mag-release ng book. Like I said, I think I said it in the book. I'm really a
Mm-hmm.
nobody, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just some guy who started a podcast. Pero
Mm-hmm.
and not to be too religious, but I think the Lord called me
Mm-hmm.
to do this at this very moment and ma-release yung
Mm-hmm.
book. I've been praying a lot dito sa release ng book na ito. Parang
Mm-hmm.
I pray na, Lord, sana hindi pa pasado ang divorce bill or SOGI bill when the book
Mm-hmm.
comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And to answer the second part of your question, what I would like to achieve with this book
Mm-hmm.
is, at the very least, sana makapag-start ng conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure kung may papasa yung divorce bill, SOGI bill, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm at least I'm hoping na all the bases are covered. Talagang pag-isipan ng mga senator ito na
Mm-hmm.
yung pros and cons, they really need to weigh it,
Mm-hmm.
dahil sayang kung may papasa, let's say, yung divorce bill under weak arguments ng mga against divorce, medyo sayang, hindi na pag-isipan. So, yun lang, at
Mm-hmm.
least start the conversation, and from there, at least fruitful conversation. That's my aim din sa book. That's why may
Mm-hmm.
mahabang section on prepare,
Uh-huh.
fruitful
Mm-hmm.
and charitable conversation. So that's my hope sa book. At least it improves the discourse ng
Mm-hmm.
mga tao.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jay Aruga, podcaster and now book author, of the conservative Kaba, three-step approach to protect the Filipino family from woke ideology. So thank you for that conversation about your book. We didn't talk about everything in your book, but just hopefully it would get people interested in reading it and
Thank you. Yeah.
maybe getting into the meat of what you're trying to say. So yes, thank you very much. Now we move on to our last segment, which is recommendations, where we recommend
Mm,
other, no,
mm,
usually materials like books, music, movies, etc. But for this special author edition
mm,
of uh this podcast, I'd like to ask maybe
mm.
Sir Jay Aruga to try and recommend some steps and tips for
Yeah.
people who have a book in mind, but
Mm,
would need some advice to finish theirs. How did you
yes.
finish yours, especially just until like last January? So yeah,
Oo nga.
this
Yeah.
go ahead.
I'll try not to give cliche ng advice.
Mm-hmm.
What I
Yeah.
did for me is, really, I plan to have a book. Then I tried to analyze why nahirapan ako magsulat. So that's
Mm.
part of it. Inisip ko, bakit ba ako nahirapan magsulat? And sometimes you make excuses kaya hindi ka makapagsulat, and you
Mm-hmm.
try to list down all your excuses and
Mm-hmm.
do something about it. So in my case, hindi ako mapagsulat ng book noon because
Mm.
ongoing pa yung podcast. So
Mm.
what I did is, this is my excuse nung time na yon, ongoing podcast. I
Mm.
took a break muna sa podcasting for
Mm.
1 month.
Mm.
And dun sa 1 month na yon, I aimed to write at least a page a day. So
Mm-hmm.
pupunta talaga ako sa mga coffee shops,
Mm.
undisturbed. Nagta-type ako ng
Mm.
book, and ine-edit ko. Yung iba doon na sulat
Mm-hmm.
ko din naman sa podcast. But I need to just go through it again para
Mm-hmm.
maging book form siya. So, yun lang. That's my advice.
Mm-hmm.
Analyze your schedule.
Yeah.
What's keeping you from writing a book?
Mm-hmm.
Then list down your excuses.
Mm-hmm.
Then try to destroy your excuses one by one.
Destroy.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Destroy your
Destroy
excuses. Yeah.
excuses. Yes. So
It's a
yeah.
good other book or a t-shirt actually. Destroy your
I
excuses.
think nakuha ko yun sa isang t-shirt eh. Pero yeah.
Okay, that's a good. Wow. Okay. How about did you listen to music when you're
Mhm.
typing, or do you get too distracted?
Music. Mahilig ako sa Mozart eh. Mozart. So, tsaka,
Mozart.
yeah,
Okay.
when driving. So, yun yung by default. Or yung Catholic
Mm,
lo-fi ni Matt Fradd. So,
Catholic
there's,
lo-fi.
so yun yung
Okay.
mga gusto kong pakinggan.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure kung I listen to it while writing, but I listen to them while thinking. While thinking. So,
Okay.
from
All
there,
right.
I get ideas. So, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Mm.
Well, um, I'm not a book author myself, but I have written some stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Mm.
like Jay, I listen to
Mm.
lo-fi, the
Yeah. Yeah.
various lo-fi. There's a
Mm.
Naruto lo-fi. There's
Uh,
a lot
uh,
for lo-fi for everything.
mm.
There's Frank Sinatra lo-fi. There's a Pinoy lo-fi.
Oh,
There's I forgot what you call
galing
that. Not
ah.
going Sinescuela lo-fi. That's one of my favorites. Tayo na sa
Yeah,
Sinescuela.
I'll check
Lo-fi
those out.
nila.
Okay.
Yes, I'll
Sige.
put the link to that in the show notes.
Mm.
But of course, we like Mozart.
Mm.
I listened to this guy called Recondite, so it's a bit more
Mm.
techno, and he provided the soundtrack for the young Pope. So I think of
Mm.
Pope Pius, like Jude
Mm.
Law's Pope Pius. So it's kind of
Oh,
like that. It's very
galing.
monotonous. It's very mechanical. So
Yeah.
it's like you go through a rhythm for that.
Yeah.
But besides that, that's a high tech answer. My low tech answer would be like wherever you are, you
Mm.
always, at least I always try to carry like a small notebook, not even my cell phone, a small
Yeah.
notebook.
Mm.
If I have a thought,
I do that
write
as
it
well.
down,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
did it as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's good.
Tama,
Well, there
tama.
you go. Great
But
minds.
no, what I use is Google Keeps. Google Keeps.
Mm.
Right. So sa
Is this
cellphone,
a paid
Google Keeps.
advertisement of Google Keeps?
Google
What's that?
Keeps.
Yeah,
No, parang siya yung
yeah.
note version. Alam ko yung Samsung meron siyang
Uh-huh.
Samsung Notes, pero yung Google meron siyang Google Keeps.
Mm-hmm.
And ang
Mm-hmm.
ang gusto ko dito is sinesave niya sa cloud yung mga notes. Ang problem ko sa Samsung Notes before is once nag-upgrade ka ng phone, wala na yon. Hindi mo
Mm-hmm.
transfer sa
Okay.
ibang phone yung Samsung Notes.
Mm-hmm.
At least si Google Keeps kaya. And usually in the middle of driving, doon ako nagkakaroon ng inspiration. Kaya
Mm-hmm.
tatabi ako sa side ng road. Tsaka magta-type ako.
Okay.
Oh, there.
I mean, that's responsible of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And
You're
dadagdag ko sa music.
responsible on the road,
Yeah.
yeah.
Dadagdag ko sa music. Gusto ko rin nga pala yung mga Final Fantasy soundtrack. So, yung
Beautiful.
background ko. So, especially Final
Mm.
Fantasy
Final Fan.
7. Ganda ng
Okay, classic.
soundtrack niya.
Yeah. Mm.
Kaya yun.
Actually, for me, I don't know if I'm sure a lot of people play this game, but
Mm.
whether you play the game or not, you should try listening to the Genshin Impact soundtrack. My personal favorite
I'll check
is
that out.
Liu, the Chinese inspired one. So they have Chinese instrumentals. Actually, it's
Sige.
weird. They have 7 different continents, and for each
Mm.
continent, it's based on a real life continent. So one is based on European music,
Wow.
another is based on like China, Japan.
Ano music
This one,
ng
the
Antarctica?
Fontaine.
Ano music ng Antarctica?
You know what? There is a continent upcoming called Chesnaya, which is based on Russia and a frozen ice. So it's Antarctica. So it must be penguins, penguin music. And if you know Happy Feet, they have great music.
Okay.
So yeah, no, but Genshin Impact music, any of them, they're all great. I listen to them when I do my own writing. So yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, lots of music now for the recommendations list. So hopefully this will inspire you to write your own books or to get work done in any way you can. Okay, so Jay Aruga, please invite the listeners to buy your book. Where can they buy it, and where
Yes.
can they get signatures, autographs?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can buy it sa St. Paul's bookstore nationwide, wherever
Mhm.
there's a St. Paul's bookstore. I
Mhm.
posted a link sa the Jay Aruga Show podcast Facebook page for Shopee naman. And
Mhm.
just let me know kung order kayo ng Shopee, you want
Mhm.
it signed. message nyo lang din
Mm-mm.
ako. And more importantly, Matt, I'm not sure kung before September 14 may release tong episode na ito. I will be at the MIBF, Manila
Mm.
International Book Fair,
Okay.
September 14, Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
2 p.m. So we can
Mm-hmm.
hang out there kung nandun kayo sa
Yeah.
area sa SMX.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there, that's where you can get the book.
Oh, actually, this book hasn't been signed yet, so we might
Sige.
finally meet. Yeah.
All right,
And it's
cool.
my annual tradition to go there anyways. So I'll see. I'll try to
Oh, yeah, I'm
check your booth
excited.
out.
Oh,
Yeah.
makikita
Wonderful.
kita in person finally.
Finally, yeah, after
Yes,
years. Oh my
after
gosh.
years. Oh,
Yeah. Mm-mm. Okay. So you can get it on Shopee and
mm,
St. Paul's and the
yeah,
Manila International Book Fair. Okay.
right.
And I believe you have this new project, with another writer and
Yeah.
speaker. Can you talk about that? Like
Yes.
a
So
Sentinel, I believe. Yeah.
the Sentinel PH. Yes. So the Sentinel
Mm.
PH, we're aiming it to be the Daily Wire of the Philippines, and
Wonderful.
and we're having a new project. Uh, siguro if you head there sa Facebook page namin, search nyo lang the Sentinel PH. We're asking for donations kasi
Mm-hmm.
kakaroon kami ng documentary. And
Mm.
what's this documentary about? Basahin nyo lang doon.
Okay.
So yun, we're aiming it to be the Daily Wire ng Philippines, because we need it, and
Mm.
just to balance things out, it's a bansa. So check that
Who's
out.
in this
Yeah.
project? So it's just you and
Anthony James Perez. So he also
mhm.
have a book, The Man You're Meant to Be. So check out
Mhm.
niya rin yung aklat niya.
Okay. All right. So we'll link
Yep.
we'll give the links of the Sentinel PH also in the show notes.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, Jay Aruga, for sharing the story behind your book, and of course taking a sneak peek at the contents of the book. But if you want to read it, yeah, we encourage you to buy your own copy and hopefully have it signed at the Manila International Book Fair. We'll try to have this released by that time or before that. So yeah, and hopefully we'll have you again soon. You'll keep in touch, Jay. Thank you very.
Yeah.
Congratulations again.
Salamat.
Okay. The PI podcast can be found on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You may send us an email at pipodcastph@gmail.com if you have any personal messages, questions, or suggestions for the podcast. Let us know for new topics or personal questions regarding politics. But until the next episode, magandang gabi mga ka-PI. And pause.